Hello, genealogists. This is Craig, and this is Just Genealogy. And today I would like to talk about books about land. Now, on several occasions, and I'll try to put the links for most of them down in the description, have talked about bounty land, state bounty land, federal bounty land. I've talked about land books generally that are written by genealogists, such as the Hatcher book and the Home book. I've talked about all those books before, those books that are readily available to genealogists that are interested in land. But that's not what I'm going to talk about today. What I'm going to talk about is if you want to take a deep dive, and I mean a very deep dive, into land and have a better understanding, not so much for how to access the records, but why the records exist, which in my mind is very important in your record evaluation, and how the individuals might qualify for land. In other words, what was the land policy? Now, probably my favorite book of the books I'm going to talk about is 60 Million Acres, American Veterans and Public Lands Before the Civil War. Now, this book goes into great detail in regards to issues that deal with the concept of land. It talks about largely bounty land and the Mexican War. And then it talks about the Bounty Land Act of 1855, acres for old men, and then what is defined as best evidence for obtaining a land warrant. It talks about prices, markets, and fairness in trading of land warrants. It talks about land sharks and loan sharks and squatters and users of land warrants in the upper Mississippi Valley. And then it talks about land warrant grants in a historic perspective. Now, one of the nice things about this book is that it has several illustrations of land warrants. It also talks to various tables, summary of bounty land grants 1847 to 1855, public land entries by cash sale and warrants 1840 to 1860, geographic distribution of bounty land petitions to the 33rd 1853 to 1855 Congress. It's full of all kinds of things that will help you to better understand how one would qualify for the land, how they compared to other folk getting land, those kind of things. In my mind, it's a great read. It's expensive to find, but it's a great read. The second book talks about a history of public land policies, and this one by Hibbard is, I guess, my second favorite, in that it deals with the issues of both the cash sale system and the credit system, and talks about land as a function of the time frame that you're dealing with it. How the federal government got the land, how they went about disposing of the public domain, what their early plans were, and then how they went forward with the credit system. And then when that didn't work out too well, they went forward after 1820 with the cash sale system. It also talks about military bounty lands, and then preemption rights and those kind of things, speculation. And then it also goes into the various kinds of grants, educational grants, swamp grants, the homestead, modifications to the Homestead of the Act, the Timber Culture Act, the Desert Land Acts, all those kind of things that I don't care about, because my focus generally is on military bounty land. But I want to know about these things because I never know when somebody's going to ask me a question about them. And this book is from the perspective of general land public policy over the course of the history of the nation, probably the best book out there. And it's by Benjamin Horace Hibbard. The third book that I use is Robbins' book, Our Landed Heritage. And what I like best about it is actually its illustrations, because it talks about land claims of the 13 states, Indian secessions in the Northwest, 1789 to 1816, and then those across the South from 1830 to 1834. then the federal land grants to the railroads, preemption frauds, original land entries, disposition of the public domain to 1915, then conservation and reclamation to 1917. And these are all illustrations that are in this book. And there are also several maps that I find quite useful in understanding exactly what's going on. And it brings us all the way up from the beginning, all the way into the New Deal. And then finally, the final book is The Public Land Studies in the History of the Public Domain by Vernon Carstensen. And I use this book so much that the cover's falling off of it. I'll have to tape it up in a minute. So this book is a little bit different in that instead of dealing with it in general terms, it basically is full of essays about specific pieces. For example, in it there by Rudolf Freud is Military Bounded Lands and the Origins of the Public Domain, which is a good read. And then it also talks about things like the Iowa Claims Club, the mineral land question in California. These are just essays. Now, some of them may be of interest to you and some of them may not. But in this, we'll find out about the agricultural colleges. We'll find out how the public land system was applied to Louisiana, which is a little bit different than anywhere else because of the sense of the French. And then there is an appendix which talks to the original land entries, the principal meridians, the highlights of history of the public domain, source materials for the history of the law of the public lands, public land records in the federal government, and then the statutory opening dates of district land offices in the various states. That's kind of cool. And then who the commissioners of the General Land Office and directors of the Bureau of Land Management were. I don't really care about that piece either. But sometimes I find that being able to find a specific essay in this book might give me better insight into what I'm actually interested in. So what I've done is I've put all these books in the description. I'll put the other land courses that I've done in the description. But if you really want to do a deep dive into understanding military bounding land and the laws associated with it and policy associated with it and the concept of the public domain and the policies of the government regarding the public domain, these 4 books, I think, are the 4 best books out there to actually deal with that kind of deep dive. Now, not everybody's going to want to do that. There are probably only a few of us to date who've actually done that kind of deep dive in regards to land. But if you do, it gives you a much better perspective on what you're doing. So this has been Craig. This has been Just Genealogy. And today we've been talking about those books that you might want to add concerning land to your genealogy library if you really want to take a deep dive into the public domain. Thank you so much.